Hey everybody, it's Cinnamon Cooney, your Art Sherpa, and today we're going to talk about the 6 colors that every artist, the 8 colors that every artist needs. It's 6 primaries plus white and black. I'm going to explain to you why. I'm going to give you a lot of insights into why your color mixing may have gone wrong. I'm going to break this down into such a way that no matter what brand of paint you're using, you'll be able to use these principles to improve your color mixing. So I mean from Deco Craft Paint all the way to Golden Artist Colors, this will improve your result. In fact, having this work well will do more for you than upgrading your paint, right? Now, if you know this and you upgrade your paint, the sky's the limit. But there's no point in upgrading your paint until you understand this principle. So we're going to go into why color mixing for artists is so different than color theory when we think of light. We're going to talk about the myth of primary colors make all other colors. They do, but not really in paint. And we're going to put that into practice. So this is a paint with me. And the reason I want you to paint with me is I want you to go into your paint bucket and solve this with me as we go. Now, I'm going to go through this class kind of straight through. This is a live stream, and I'm going to take questions at the end of the show. So the moderator is going to be grabbing questions. Now, I may have already answered your question, and they might share a video with you that covers that already. But we're going to try to collect those questions together and get that to you at the end of the show. If you have a question, put it all in caps. If you have ever been unsatisfied with your color in your painting, felt your colors were dull, felt you weren't getting color mixes like the people you see online or your teachers in classes, if you've had any frustration with color, I need you to pump the brakes and come just do this with me. I promise it's worth your time. Are you ready to do this? On the mic is my husband, John.
Hello.
He is going to help me bring you this really important color mixing class. This is the first concept in primary colors and color mixing that you kind of need to have down to make all the rest of it work. But once you get this, everything else gets easier. I promise. You ready to start going into it?
I think so.
Okay. So we're going to talk about our color wheel first for just a second. Remember, I told you we'd get back into it. If you've never seen a color wheel and you don't know how to read it, you might want to watch my 10-minute video that kind of explains to you where things are. I'm going to show you a couple color wheels. I'm going to show you the traditional color wheel, which is kind of wrong. I'm going to show you the CMYK color wheel, which is right but not always helpful to artists, and explain to you why and how to use these to find the paint in your paint bucket that will help you do this exercise. So first of all, the thing to understand is, and I'm going to demonstrate this to you, is that what we're taught in school is that red and blue and yellow, which are primary colors set at equidistances on the color wheel, make every other color in the spectrum. And that's true with light and super not true with paint. And that's because of a fact about red and yellow and blue. Okay. When you mix any red and yellow and blue together, you get a neutral color, some range of brown to gray to even black, depending on which 3 primaries you pick. So what people said was, well, then CMYK is the correct color. And it's a little truer. That's a magenta, a true yellow, which is generally a yellow Hansa in any color paint. So like a true magenta, a yellow Hansa, and cyan. So why don't we just use these 3 if they mix better, brighter colors? They do, but in pigment, there's a problem. And if you need to take this down as a note, we're going to make a mini book of this. But if you're going to take this down as a note, I want you guys to write this down. The issue with cyan, magenta, and lemon yellow is paint pigment has opacity. That's how the coverage of the paint pigment. And it also has tinting strength. That's how much power the paint pigment has to alter the color of another paint. Not to be mistaken with the tint tone shade that we did earlier in the week. These 3 colors are very transparent. So even though we kind of know where our brown exists, and that's generally an orange that's shaded with a black, because of the transparency of primary yellow, magenta, and cyan, you lose most of your landscape colors and they don't have great coverage. And so they're wonderful and beautiful, and they give you some really nice luminous colors, and they're great to have in the paint bucket, but you will always have to have convenience colors with these. Convenience colors, I'm going to explain a little bit later and show you what mine are. But that's what that is. So in your paint bucket, you need to find a red that you think looks a little bit more like fire, right? And you need to find a red that looks more like a magenta or a pink. In your paint bucket, you're going to want a yellow that is very light and kind of reminds you of like almost a yellow with a green in it, right? Like that light yellow that pops on leaves in spring, and then a yellow that is just a little bit more rich and makes you more think of the bottom yellows of a sunset. Now the blues, we have a hard time seeing the difference with. We're going to need a blue that has what's called a red bias, and a blue that's called a green bias, a black, and a white. How you use your wheel to find those, just throw that right there. All right, you can't. Okay. Let's throw up another step, because we got that first concept kind of out. We're going to throw up another step. So on your wheel, the old traditional old-timey color wheel that most of us have, you'll notice that it lets you know where your warm colors are and your cool colors are, right? It divides the wheel like that, but we're going to orient it on the primaries. You need a red that's on this central spectrum, right? Which would be, if you had a true primary red or the magenta, you would want it closer to the red-orange on the spectrum, and you would need a red that was closer to the red-violet on the spectrum. And you can actually swatch out and use your color wheel to kind of identify that. Then you would need a blue that's closer to the blue-green and a blue that's closer to the blue-violet. Then you would want a yellow that's closer to the yellow-orange and a yellow that's closer to the yellow-green. So that's where you're looking, because you can't get secondary and tertiary colors without it. Let's practice and see why, because that's one thing for me to say it, but let's show it. And I'm going to show you, it doesn't matter what three primary colors that you're using. I'm going to use just each side. So I've got Quin Magenta, Cad Red Medium, Cad Yellow Medium, Lemon Yellow Hansa, Ultramarine Blue, Phthalo Blue, and Mars Black. These are the ones over the years I found give me the best colors. These are not the only options, but the bias is absolutely necessary, the way that I have separated out. So let's take my Quin Magenta and put it here, right? We know what Quin Magenta looks like. And you'll want to label this in your workbook. I'm using the Fabriano Multimedia pad again. Let's, no, not that red. We're going to take the yellow and the blue. How's everybody doing today? I'm very academic today, and that's because what we're covering is kind of academic. It's not that I don't want it to be fun. I do, but I know if you guys understand this, then you're going to have much better color results when you're painting. So there's Quinacridone Magenta, Cad Yellow Medium, and let's mix out an Ultramarine Blue, right? Well, those look like the three primary colors that we know from school. What would they make if we mix them together? So I'm going to use my knife, I think, to do this, just so I don't make a mess. I'm going to take a little Ultramarine Blue, the same amount of kind of Cad Yellow, and a similar amount of Quin Magenta. And let's mix this up. Okay. So what we're seeing is that primary colors will generally make a brown to a gray. This is clearly more of a brown, right? We've got that brown right there. And you can see that it's brown if I come and mix a little white into it. You can kind of see the brown gray of it. It's like a putty. It's not uncommon. I think kids, the first thing you see them do when they get the paint is mix all the colors together because they're really hoping it's going to make a rainbow. I think we all hope it's going to make a rainbow. Well, what if I used these over here? Maybe these look a little more primary to you, right? So let's come over here to Cad Red. And we're going to go through this step by step, and I'm going to demonstrate it to you, and you're going to see where the bias shows and how you can tell if you have a bias, even if your eyes have trouble seeing it. But we're going to take this like one step at a time. We're going to take the whole merry path all the way through so that later when I get to the part that shows you why, you're like, oh, because I saw this earlier.
Is that a blue or a red shade of blue?
Well, let's get into that in a second. I'll explain that to you in a
great.
second. For sure. We're going to do questions at the end.
Yes.
Questions are going to be at the end. So take all the questions and put them at the end. If we haven't gotten to them through the video, we're going to answer them. But that's a thing we are covering deeply, is the bias of the color. So those look very primary, don't they? Cad Red, the lemon yellow Hansa, and the Phthalo Blue. Well, from, you know, what do those three make? Right? So if I take a little blue, wiping off my knife, got to keep that knife clean. And I take a nice little bead of my yellow here. And a nice little bead of my Cad Red. There we go. Pretty dull, isn't it, as a color? A little darker than the one above it. Might have needed a little more red. Just to make that. I'm just making sure the mixes are kind of 1 part red, 1 part yellow, 1 part blue. And if I come into here and I add some white into it, we can see not a vibrant color. We can also kind of see the tinting strength of the paint. The tinting strength of the Cad Red and the Phthalo Blue is so much stronger. So it doesn't matter how we mix these up. Red, yellow, blue. Doesn't matter if we use alizarin crimson, lemon yellow Hansa, and cyan blue. We're going to get a dull color. It doesn't matter what version of red and yellow and blue we use. We're going to get a dull color. Cyan, yellow, and magenta, a dull color. So that's the thing that you have to know in your head. If I mix all 3 primaries together, I neutralize the colors, I desaturate them, and I create some neutral value. That's the most important part. All right. So the difference between pigment, right, and light is that pigment, let's get a Quin Magenta. I'm going to take a little Quin Magenta. I'm going to mix a little white into that Quin Magenta because sometimes if I mix white into it, I can see the color a little bit better, right? So there's that red and pink. And I'm going to show you how to do this on the wheel. I'm going to take my Cad Red. These two are really easy to see. All right, and take my Cad Red and let's mix a little white into the Cad Red so we can just see it. Well, the first thing that we know from doing this is generally we think of when we mix white into a red, we're supposed to get pink, but we only got pink over here on the magenta. We got a coral over here on the red. That's our first clue that there's a bias in the paint. A bias, it's like a hidden agenda. Let's get our color wheel out and kind of see if we can see that hidden agenda. Well, this red is much closer to here, and I can see that it's a little bit more in that red-orange space. And this red is somewhere here, isn't it? That's where our magenta actually lives on the wheel. It certainly doesn't look like this at all. It's much closer to this, isn't it? So the bias of this is a blue bias. It's a cool bias. There's a bit of a hidden blue in there. And in this, there's a bit of a hidden yellow in there, isn't there? Now, where does this make things hard? Well, when we're going to go through and we're going to find the biases of these two just real quick, and then I'm going to show you how you don't get purple and you don't get green when you expect. We're going to go back to this and understand why. And again, I'm sorry. No, this is super academic. No, we're still seeing the biases. So I'm going to take this one and I put them together for kind of a reason, and you'll see it in a second. And I've added some white to this. Well, that's sort of lovely, isn't it? That white. And you can kind of really see that blue when you add that white to it. Sometimes just adding tinting with a little bit of white can make a big difference. I'm going to come here and do phthalo. Now, I tell you guys all the time, there's this point in your life where ultramarine blue out of the tube and phthalo blue out of the tube will not look the same to you, and you will see the bias. Your eyes will develop as you paint. That is something that is a trained muscle, trained skill. It's not an innate skill, so if you don't have it today, don't worry. As you paint, you'll get it. Do you see how very different these two blues are? All right, let's get our color wheel out. Okay, so we're over here on our color wheel, and we're looking at our blues, right? Look at that, where you see it in the white. Well, that's over here, blue-green, and over here is the blue-violet. This is a green-biased blue, this one right here. It's a green-biased blue, and this one is a red-biased blue. Okay. So now that we see the biases, I'm going to show you how these don't make the secondary colors you expect, and you're going to see that it's because of primary colors make brown. We can do a new step. All right, so say you are a person who got a kit from a family member, okay, and it had ultramarine blue, very common color, because it's a historical color that's a famous color for artists, in a painting kit. And let's say that it had cad yellow hue, very common, or just Hansa yellow. Those are kind of really very close, right? And you're like, oh, blue and yellow make green, and you're expecting to get a nice bright green. I'm going to come here and mix these two together. And I do get kind of a green, but it isn't a bright green. And I can mix more blue into it, and I get a darker version of that green, and I can mix more yellow into it, and I get a lighter version of that green, and I can be like, all right, maybe if I mix white into it, and boy, doesn't that look like avocado, right? That looks like avocado here. And the reason that it does is because this is a red biased blue, and this is a red biased yellow. What's the hidden intruder in our color mix? Who's snuck in on us to create a neutralized color? Red has. Even though we see blue and we see yellow and we think we're going to just make a secondary color, a hidden red has come down in here and kind of snuck in between these two. And that's because there's a bit of a purpley cast to this blue, which is great when you're mixing purples. Terrible when you're mixing yellows. So a lot of times what happens to new painters before you get into any of the other color mixing troubles that you could even be involved in, they get a kit that maybe has 3 primaries, and because paint companies don't always think about this part of it, I don't know why not. Many of them do, but not all of them. You can end up finding yourself never getting a bright green. But what if I had lemon, right? Anytime yellow says lemon or light, it is a cool yellow or a green biased yellow. That's a verbal cue. And you can kind of see that when these two are next to each other, can't you? See how much more vibrant it is? I'm going to put some phthalo blue here. And we're going to see why it's so different. Let's put some of that phthalo blue here. These don't look that different from each other on the paper, do they? They don't, and yet we're about to see a very different color mixing experience. So I have my phthalo blue and my lemon yellow. I'm going to mix them together. Well, that's just a much brighter green, isn't it? And if I mix a lot of yellow in it, well, I get a much brighter green. It's like spring lemon green. And if I mix a lot more blue in it, right, I'm almost getting a phthalo green or turquoise. And I can really see what it is when I mix in white. This is a brighter green set than this is, and will always be a brighter green set. So this is fantastic if I'm painting a landscape where there's a lot of neutral green plants, colors are far away and desaturated. Maybe it's a time of year when things are dry and they tend to lose their chlorophyll. But if I'm doing a landscape like, say, Ireland, where someone is moving, if I were to do this in Ireland, I wouldn't get the greens that I'm seeing from ultramarine blue and cad yellow, no matter what I did. No matter how hard I worked or tried, it would never, ever, ever result in the color that I'm looking for. Now, let's try this with red and blue. Let's take a little cad red. Right? And we know the bias of that, right? We know where that's at. And let's take a little, oh, actually, I'm not making orange, I'm making purple. Gotta mix that out. I don't want any pigment in my brush when I'm doing this. All right, so there's my blue. Red and blue, those are distinctly red and blue, which everybody told you in grade school makes purple. Remember that? Red and blue makes purple. It's a question on Millionaire. And I'll tell you what, that would be a hard question for an artist to answer. There we go. Now I'm going to come here. What color does that make? Well, gosh darn it, that's not purple. That's not purple at all. Okay, well, I'll add a little more red to it. Maybe it'll get better if I add a little more red to it. No, maybe a little more red, right? That's what artists do, like new artists, they keep adding red. Well, it's just getting browner. All right, maybe I didn't have enough blue. Let's add a little more blue. And then even if I come in and get white into this, all I'm ever going to get is gray. And that's because this red is a yellow biased red, right? It's over towards the orange. And this blue, right, is a green biased blue, which kind of means that's another way of saying there's a strong yellow value in it. So what snuck into our mix? Yellow snuck in here. So now we have red, yellow, and blue in the bias. So we can't get a bright green. Here, we had a green biased blue and a green biased yellow, right? It's just yellow and blue. We don't have any red that snuck in. But we did have yellow that snuck in here and we couldn't get purple. But what happens if we mix friends? And I do sometimes think of the paint as friends. Let's go to the Quinacridone Magenta. And again, this is true of any magenta or any of the magenta pinks. Okay, so it doesn't have to just be Quin Magenta. And I'm going to mix Ultramarine Blue. And let's mix them together. Well, Ultramarine Blue and a little Quin Magenta distinctly make a purple. If I add a little more magenta to it, it gets like a little brighter into that, and I can go a little bluer and make a darker. And you can even see when I add white to it that it is distinctly, absolutely purple. Okay, and that worked because I only have a bias that still makes purple. So this is kind of got a blue bias to it, right? It's closer to the cool red. We saw that on the color wheel. And this has a kind of red bias to it. We saw that on the color wheel. What do red and blue always make? They always make purple. So what happens to new painters? What throws them off is that they get a kit, has a bunch of colors in it. They don't know there's this hidden color combo situation happening in their pigment at all, right? They have no idea that this is going on, and they're frustratingly trying to mix colors and they can't get them. So yes, you can mix every color from red, yellow, and blue, but you may not be able to mix every color from your red, yellow, and blue. Now, orange, I found, and I'll just show you this really quick. I have found that all the reds and all the yellows make a fairly okay orange, right? They'll come right here and I'll make that magenta and I'll come in and get this yellow, and you can see it's going to make a fairly okay orange. Some of them will be brighter and some of them will be not quite as bright, but it's not as tragic, right? Because we know this has a blue bias and this has a yellow bias, and we're going to get an orange here, but it's not a tragic orange. See, it's not perfect, but it's not a nightmare. And so sometimes what will happen to the student, I'm mixing magenta and lemon yellow kind of together. Let me get a better mix of it. You can see that. Not that far off of each other. And then I will mix Cad Red and lemon yellow. Right, still not that bad. None of these are maybe what you're looking for, but they're not terrible. And this not terrible segment can kind of throw you off because you're like, well, I'm getting orange. I can mix orange. I can't tell you how many times I've seen in my group somebody's like, I can mix orange, but I can't mix green or purple for the life of me. It's because the yellows and reds are more forgiving in the biases than the reds and blues and yellows and blues are. It's the red and blue that just has such a strong bias and such a strong tinting strength that it overcomes everything. Okay? So, that's why artists use something called a split primary palette. That means they have 2 reds, 2 yellows, and 2 blues. And then to be able to get to browns and tints and tones, you have to have white and black. So that's why it's 8 colors plus 2. That's why they say that. So let's talk about now my particular one, my very, very specific one, and we'll mix this out so you can have this. Mine is always Quin Magenta, and I'm going to mix white, and you do yours, okay? Find your magenta, find the purple that made the good purple in your paint kit, right? That's what you're looking for. And if you can't get a good purple, then yes, you do need to go buy a tube of paint. But you don't need to buy every tube of paint, right? You just need to buy, here's the Cad Red. Okay, so Quin Magenta, Cadmium Red. That's my choice. Painted a long time. These are what I have when I have to have something. And yes, I loved Tight Knit Yellow, but that's a hard pigment to find, and it has like the Prop 65 thing on it, so which is that warning for health in California. And I'm like, it just has been trouble for people to get around the globe. Okay. So you can see when it's added white, it lightens nicely. So that's cadmium yellow medium, not cadmium yellow dark. That bias is real red, not cadmium yellow light for this one, because that bias is really green. I'm going to do the lemon yellow Hansa, where you could use cadmium yellow light. But see how these are super different from each other? And you can see that I get a much brighter, almost the same value as the white paper when I add white, just a little bit of white to this. The colors that you're going to see in Acrylic April coming up that are so luminous come out of that lemon yellow in the sun, like the different stuff. Now let's do our blues. My blues, Ultramarine blue, which is a red biased blue. I'm going to use the color wheel to give you the answer about whether this is actually really nice. Okay, let's come here. Get a little white. There we go. Those are the 3 primaries. Ultramarine blue, Phthalo blue, Cad yellow medium, lemon yellow Hansa, Quinacridone Magenta, Cad red medium. For me. But what you're looking for in your paint bucket is a red that reminds, the visual I can tell you is a red reminds you of a sunset. It's an orange red. It reminds you of fire. A red that reminds you of a pink, like a pink flower. We're just thinking the pinkest thing, flamingos, like more in that range. A yellow that's a little bit more like the sun, the bottom of a sunset, and a yellow that reminds you more of a lemon, which is why they call a lot of these yellow light or lemon yellow. Any of those. Yellow light, lemon yellow will work. Ultramarine blue, phthalo blue, because this is the red bias blue. That is the green bias blue. Okay, so we are cooking along. All right, now, what does this let me do? Well, this lets me make, and I have one pre-made up for you guys, the full kind of spectrum of color. That was just me messing around. I gave myself like 5 minutes and made a bunch of little colors from these. Right? Phthalo blue, ultramarine blue, quinacridone magenta, cad, red medium, lemon yellow, cad yellow. All right. This is not the only color mixing course. Next step, I'm going to explain to you just real quick what are convenience colors. New step, because you guys need to understand that. So if we mix all those, then why do we have convenience colors? All right. Dioxazine purple, I'm going to put some out, is a convenience color. It is a deep purple pigment. And I'm going to just kind of show it to you. It is almost to the eye, when it's out pure, a black. But when you add a little bit of white to it, you can see that it's definitely distinctly purple, isn't it? Let's add a little more white to it. Just kind of really, really tinting it out for you so you can kind of see that. But it's a very strong tinting strength. I really love the mixes that it makes with Cad Red. It's a convenience color because it's made for me. I don't have to mix it. I don't have to create it with my prime palette, right? And it may create mixes that these colors do not easily get to. It may create hues that I just can't get to easily with my other colors. So if I come into my Quin and my ultramarine blue, which make my this purple, and you can see I'm right here. It's dark, but it's not quite as dark as that, is it? I'm going to add a little bit of white, and it tints much easier. So when I need a strong purple and I'm trying to get something that's super rich or has a certain thing, I'm going to have dioxazine purple in my palette. Some people pick a violet light. Both of those choices are fine, but a lot of people will pick a purple. Another convenience color that I have in my palette, and you guys are kind of getting a sneak peek at the Acrylic April palette this year. We switched Tighten It Yellow to Lemon Yellow Hansa for the availability and all of that. Let's talk about brown. I have Burnt Sienna. There's a lot of browns you can buy. Why would I buy brown? Well, one, because brown is a pigment that I can make, but this particular one, right, Burnt Sienna, well, it's very opaque. It has nice tinting strength. It works really well. Now, can I make, and I'll put a little white in it so you can see it. You can kind of see its little beige there, right? I know that I can make brown. I would make brown by creating a good orange. Right? And then I could add a good green to it. A little more red as I get there. Still I'm working. If I want it to be a little darker, I might add a little more blue. So that's what I'm playing with, right? And I'm working, I'm still mixing. And I can get a brown. I may have to put out some more red. I can add a little more red to it to bias it almost to, let's see how close I can come, right? It's not that far off from this hue. And can add white to it. right? But when I have this brown here, it's easy for me to take this to a burnt umber. I just add black to it. I can deepen it. I can lighten it. I can yellow it and get to ochre if I don't want to have ochre as a convenience color. I often have ochre as a convenience color because it's super useful for skin tones. But, you know, I've got to have this. And then another convenience color that I tend to always have is Phthalo Green. This is a blue biased green. I can get a pretty close hue from this palette for it, but let's put this little green out. All right, that's actually rather lovely. And here's a neat thing I can do with this. When I add white to it, it makes almost a radioactive mint. Look how minty that mint is. This is sort of a unique mint that Phthalo Green makes that I particularly like. I get any of my yellows into it, it can get crazy for me, right? So this is just really lovely for me to work in. Do I have a lot of other greens? Yes, I do. But guess what happens when I mix Phthalo Green with the oxazine purple, which I can do. Very fun thing. Actually, I'll put it out so you can really see it happen. So you remember, Dox purple. Let's put out swatches so you can see how crazy it is. Dox purple, Phthalo Green, make blue. And also sometimes, you know, the other thing that people don't know, I'll mix some white into it so you can see that blue better. It's a really neat blue, and it's a neat kind of gray. And I use this a lot in oceans when I'm talking about storms, right? So here we go. That's actually not what you'd expect. I did a whole painting where I made blue primary colors with secondary colors, and I painted a blueberry with that mix, and you wouldn't believe it's that, but it is. It's just crazy. Let's take our Quin Magenta. And our Phthalo Green. And they make kind of a purple. Isn't that wild? They get kind of a purple from that. So those are really nice convenience colors. I always keep, I will not be using this for Acrylic April. For Acrylic April, I will have Quinacridone Magenta, Cad Red Medium, Cad Yellow Medium, Lemon Yellow Hansa, Ultramarine Blue, Phthalo Blue, Dox Purple, Burnt Sienna, Phthalo Green, Titanium White, and Mars Black. But I, as an artist, always keep a little of the yellow ochre. It's just a convenient color. It's a traditional historic color. It's great in landscapes. And it's a convenient color for skin tone. So if I put that out there, can I mix this hue? Yes, I can. I have a whole video about how to do that. But you can see that's lovely. Now, if I come here to my yellow ochre and I get just a smidge of my Cad Red into it, I get into skin tones real fast. Well, really, it's good for Caucasian skin tones, and it's also good for warming darker skin tones. So if you have a deep brown skin tone, this is really wonderful as a way to create reflections without just going into white. So that's very, very lovely. So those are convenience colors. Colors that I could mix with this palette, but I don't mix with this palette. And this is this basic concept. So hopefully you're looking at your paint and realizing if you're not getting color vibrancy like you had hoped, if you had been looking for color vibrancy and not been getting it, what's probably happening is that you have that hidden red, yellow, blue coming up and messing you up. Now, let's questions.
Okay.
I know that was a lot, and I know it was academic.
Okay.
Oh, I'm sorry I had to get academic with you guys, but it really is where it's going wrong for you.
Let's do this. I was expecting you to be on the other side for questions, but it's okay. We're going to move you over there in just a second. Let me get so the first questions that I will go back up here. Where
I was just putting this up because it was pretty, but you can make me big and just make me small if I have to demo something.
There was some questions about about, does this apply to oil at all?
Yeah. This applies to watercolor. Watercolors are way more forgiving because they're so transparent. Remember I said like the cyan and yellow and magenta are transparent in acrylic and oils. All watercolors have a transparency to them, but this same basic color mixing theory applies to everything in pigment.
Including gouache specifically.
Yeah, gouache. Yeah, gouache especially. But you know, it's any color mixing that you're doing. It's true from your crayons, through colored pencils, through just anything. These color things are true in pigment. Because if you think about it, a colored pencil is made with pigment and paint is made with pigment. What they both have in common is the colorant that the manufacturer uses, which is the pigment.
That seems like a pretty good thing. Okay.
Yeah. So definitely, this will help you across your watercolor, your oils, your gouaches, your all of your acrylics.
Okay. So would you recommend doing a color grid with this?
So yes. You know me. I have the color mixing chart where I did a color grid, and you can use that if the mods will drop our tint tone shade chart in there. I did a chart for that, and that actually helps you get all those things with our core palette. The only thing you would change out is where I have tight knit yellow, which again, if you have tight knit yellow, don't throw it out. It's amazing. You get all those crazy colors with it, but it is hard for people to get. So for acrylic April, we switched it out to lemon yellow Hansa. So they can use Hansa yellow, lemon yellow Hansa, Cad yellow light, Cad lemon yellow, or lemon yellow. It just opens up a lot easier to get, less expensive yellows for everybody.
Now, part of the reason I think that you're asking about color grids, actually, I don't think these are related, but they are related. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. Deanna was saying that her burnt sienna is different than your burnt sienna.
Yes. Okay. So, and that's why I talk about your paint bucket and my paint bucket, and you've got to get out and play with it and see it.
And you get to a grid.
And you got to do, you got to do grids or swatches or something. You have to at least swatch, grid if you can. And here's why. Where golden sources its burnt sienna, which is a natural pigment that exists, it comes out of the earth, right? It's not necessarily where like Matisse sources it from. They're out of Australia, right? So they have a different ochre and sienna source. All of the different pigments kind of come out into this marketplace. Phthalo blue is like the hardest color to make. Every paint company has kind of, they all get real close on phthalo blue. I say phthalo blue is the one that has probably the most continuity, but they have their own formulas for it. They have their own for ultramarine blue, even though it's, you know, like a historical color. You will find like Windsor blue, ultramarine blue, Sennelier blue is maybe a little bit different across every brand. The earth pigments, ochre, umber, sienna, whether it's raw or burnt, have the most variance across paint companies. Oh, and then they have a weird chemical version of it, which is called oxide, which they make it, but it can look exactly like ochre or nothing like it. It's crazy across companies. And Cad reds can have a great variance. Like some people's Cad reds, I would consider a Cad orange or like a Cad red light, you know, and it's their Cad red, and their Cad red light, I would be like, that's Pyro orange. So you got to get your paint out and really look at it and get into this mix test. Do the mix test, because the mix test will tell you what you've got. That way you don't go buy something you don't need, and you do go buy what you really, really need.
So I'm going to say thank you to Robin.
Oh, thank you, Robin.
Thank you, Robin.
I know this is like a crazy, crazy thing, but this is where that's happening to you. And I want to get any questions.
Oh, yeah. Another question for you here. Mm-hmm. So Lily asked a good one. So as you're painting, you need to think shade first, then tone, then tint last. Is that a question mark? Like, is that the order you should do it?
No, you should think, where did I put that? Where did my wheel go? Did it fly away?
It rolled away.
I had a whole other wheel.
It rolled away.
Oh, there it is. It's under the thing. Okay. On your color wheel, you're going to see a value. Okay? That's your grayscale. That's how light or dark it is. The first thing that when you're looking at anything, you're going to want to check the value, because you can mess up the hue. That's the color, right? if the value is correct. Value is created by changing, one, you can do it with the tint, tone, and shade. That's where you add white or gray or black. Or like with red, I can lighten the value of red, right, which is about between here and here on my value scale, by coming over to my yellow, which is kind of here with yellow. Maybe I can show that to you guys. So just real quick, I'll show that to you. I can't see myself up there done, so you'll have,
Oh, okay,
I have
I'll
to
fix
trust you that it's going. All right, so I'm going to take some red and put a little red out just so that I have it. So I can lighten red. Okay, hey, okay. I can lighten red a couple of ways. I can tint it, right? Oh, I know, it saw you were coming, with a little bit of white, right? We can add a lot more white and really lighten it. And then a lot more white. And we'll do this with shading too.
And I think it's Rua. So thank you, Rua. I hope I pronounced your name Ruia.
Right. Now, I did that with white, but I can also do it with yellow by taking it into an orange. So see how I'm able to get lighter and lighter and lighter, and you can see that it is by checking your grayscale to see how it lightens up. You would get your grayscale and say, is this lightening up how many shades? And you can even take your references and make them black and white on your phone, desaturate them, and check it against this value scale. You can get really spot on if you nail your value. But there's, and then the other way, like, so say I want to darken my red, right? I can come in here and have some red. And I do this all the time in my classes. I'll take a little bit of my, oops, that got some white on it. I don't want any white. I'll add a smidge of my Phthalo Blue. And that's as effective as, say, going into my black. So if I take a little of my red and I go into my black, isn't that a trip? I can do it with the blue or the black. So that's another
crazy.
thing when you see artists going, I'm tinting it up or I'm shading it down. We might use white, but we might use a deep color that does the same thing, but keeps it like kind of vibrant, or in a mother color, which is a unifying color across a whole painting. Right? I see so many. We got to thank a bunch of people.
Oh, yes.
Got to
So
thank
many
so many
thanks.
people.
So the thanks go back to, I have to go. So Amy and Rebecca and Rua and Robin. I think, and I hope I say your name correctly. Rua, Ruia. I have a lousy tongue for that sometimes.
Yeah. So this is a great question. I can't find Quin Magenta in my country. I only found Magenta. Isn't the same? Is there a huge difference between them? No, Denise, there is not. Differences between Magentas across paint companies. Oh, and I can show you one. I can show you one right now. I'm going to put out, I can show you this. So get the Magenta that you can find in your country. That's the one that you're looking for. Just know that even in the Quin Magentas, there is like this crazy, like, and they're all PR 122. That's the pigment code for it. They look the same, right? On my palette, they look so similar. But when I get white involved, I can really see how they're different. And put a little white out so you can really see that. Because I don't really have a bunch of different burnt siennas. My mom does upstairs, but I'm traveling, so I only have the one that I'm bringing with me. Now this is Golden's Quin Magenta. And if I add a little white here, you can kind of see that. That's just lovely, right? I love that combo. I think, you know, Golden does like the perfect magenta. But when I'm taking this here, do you see how that's just already a little bit darker? And then when I get the white involved, I'll get some more white involved. And then I'll take it over. You can see it's just a little different. Sometimes when I go to mix this to get a color, I get a slightly more vibrant color. This one biases just a little more blue than this one. But if it's just magenta, which is PR 122, what you're going to have is a magenta that's as neutral in the middle of those pigment swings that you can have. Okay. So grab the magenta that you have. Absolutely, absolutely, absolutely. All right, goodness gracious, so exciting. Oh my gosh. Did you guys love this? Is this making sense? Do we have another question?
What brush do you keep mixing with?
Oh, I have grabbed the Simply Simmons number 8. We're going to try to get these in the store when it opens. I don't know if we have it yet. This is just a good brush for acrylic paint. It's the extra firm filament on a long handle, and the Simply Simmons tends to be a more economical brush. The positives of it are that it's fairly well made and quality, like it works like it's supposed to for the price point. Can't, get one of the more expensive brushes at this time. Of the economic brushes, it's the Simply Simmons one, not the Robert Simmons, who is a good brush maker, but the Simply Simmons extra firm. And they also make a hog too. So a lot of times when you see me using my Archony hogs, they're a wonderful brush. I love them. Couldn't recommend them more, but I understand. I mean, with the cost of groceries and rent and everything, you may be like, I just can't. This is a good backup to it. It will get you through. And I know we're going to get to the other side of this and our budgets are going to be great, but if you can, get into Raphael, right? Get into a tech store if you can. But if you can't, do the Simply Simmons. Oh, Amy, thank you. I need to let Cinnamon know that she's one of my superheroes and has changed my life forever, for reals. Thank you, Cinnamon, John, and Mods. Okay, do we have any other the colors? And let's recap.
Can you swatch the Cad Red next to the hue?
I don't have a Cad hue.
Oh, well, then
I don't have it. I don't carry it. Okay, so I don't have it, but I can, because again, I'm traveling, so I'm in a paint suitcase. And I already have an art hoard going. But I'm going to tell you this right now. Golden Artist Colors does the best hue. If you're trying to get a CAD paint and you don't want to buy the real pigment for health reasons, for, any of that, right? Because it's cadmium pigment, even though it's very safe bound in the paint as long as you don't eat it. But if you're like, no, I just want to do hue, I'm not going to spend that much money on a tube, Golden Artist Colors does the best hue. And they had these new range of colors for the yellows that also really replaces Cad yellow. So that's where I would go for that. Liquitex just recently fixed. For a long time, its hue was just like the Cad yellow. It was just Hansa yellow, and they did that whole test. And like, can you tell? I'm like, I could totally tell. But it's better. However, Golden tends to end up being $1 less a tube. So in the pro brands, in student brands, Sennelier Acrylic in the pouch is very good. And really what the difference is, it doesn't even always show on camera, right? Sometimes the difference is in the mix, but it's where, okay, do you guys know an artist named Thomas Kincaid? Or actually Bob Ross did this too. This is the one weird thing they have in common. Cadmium yellow. The windows and little cabins that glow, and then you turn the lights down and it still glows. That's cadmium yellow. That's why artists still paint with cadmium, because it's really vibrant. But the hues, for the most part, are good equivalent if you can get that. And every company has them. You'll just be like, it'll be like when you get a new shirt and it hasn't been washed, but then you wash it a few times and it's still the same color. It's just a little duller. That's the difference between the two. I'm sorry I don't have that tube on me. I wish I did. I'm really sorry. I usually do.
That's okay. I think that was a good question.
Okay, I had a good question. Would put rose madder. Where would Cinnamon put rose madder? I think for portrait, but still would like onion. So rose madder has some light fast issues sometimes, but generally I use it, yeah, in portraiture is like the best place to use it. And sometimes in doing historical reproductions, a good place to check where it is Golden Artist Colors did a blog under their Just Paint, and they actually organize the paint into warm and cool in relationship to each other. It's crazy. So worthwhile. Best thing ever. I love it so much. It's the Just Paint, and then you can just what colors are warm and cool, and it will tell you by every pigment in their line.
That's really great.
I know, it's just the best resource. Just go there. Another thing you can do is the Adobe Color Picker wheel. If you know the pigment code or PR code, you can sometimes find that same information in a color picker wheel.
That's pretty great.
Sennelier abstract comes in a pouch. Yes, the Sennelier abstract comes in a pouch. The Sennelier Pro Paint comes in a tube. This is their lemon yellow Hansa. Sometimes it's called Hansa lemon yellow. It doesn't matter. Hansa yellow light. Same. I like this company. So I like Golden Artist Colors. I like Sennelier. Sennelier is like 250 years old. Like they've been making paint. They made Picasso's pastels. I'm actually going to be messing with the oil pastels from his heritage line here really soon. So they just have a long storied history in art. You can still go to their store in France. I love it. It's just fantastic. It's not always available everywhere, but it's fantastic. They make a student brand of paint. The company doesn't outsource it somewhere else. They still make it in-house. And a lot of times it's the same pigment, and it's the only one that doesn't shrink when you're doing artist knife. And so I like it is the only student paint. I like Golden Artist Colors. I like Matisse Derivan. That's your Australian brand. I very much like PBO, Holbein, Acrylic is fantastic, and M. Graham across all media. All of them. All of them are good at paint across all media. Now, all of them have a student line, but all of them are good at paint across all media. And they're not the only good ones. They are just the ones that I like, that I just love. I don't like Matisse's yellow ochres and their burnt siennas. I don't know what's going on. I don't know. The reason I never talk about it on the show is I never know if it's a shipping issue, because sometimes the paint is in the hold of a plane and that can change temperature. Or on a shipping container, those things can change temperature, and temperature can affect acrylic paint. But I do have problems with them, and Liquitex also tends to have problems in the ochres. I don't know why, but they do. Okay, guys, we learned the thing. Now, is this our last color mixing class? Not at all. We've just learned a basic language. So what you want to watch, how to read a color in with fire, right? It's going to be on fire. Just gonna be so much easier. Let's recap real quick. I know recaps are kind of boring, okay, but we'll just recap real quick so we remember the concepts, because sometimes it's hard to remember concepts later. Primary colors, when they're mixed all together, make neutral gray or brown colors. So it doesn't matter what red, yellow, or blue you use. If you mix them all together, you're going to get a neutral color, right? So I can see that my magenta is a cooler color than my Cad Red, or that my ultramarine blue has more red in it than my ultramarine blue than my phthalo blue, right? So when I make ultramarine blue and Cad yellow, I don't get bright greens because they have a red bias. Boom, there's a hidden red in there. I do get beautiful greens from phthalo blue and my lemon yellow Hansa because there's only yellow and blue in there. Boom, bright greens. I get terrible purples, like not purple at all, from Cad Red and phthalo blue, and that's because Cad Red has a yellow bias and phthalo blue has a green bias, which is essentially yellow, and it's very strong. So I'm just getting gray out of that. I'm never, ever, ever going to get purple. But if I do Quin Magenta and Ultramarine Blue, I'm going to get a lot of lovely purples because they are just red and blue. And it does make purple, right? These are my colors: Quin Magenta, Cad Red, Cad Yellow, Lemon Yellow, Ultramarine Blue, Phthalo Blue. My Convenience colors, those are colors I could mix, but I like a pigment or I like a color for another reason, or it just takes a lot of work to mix that color on the palette. Dioxazine purple, convenience color. Burnt sienna, convenience color. You can mix brown, and I showed that to you here. I got a very close color. Look, those are very close in hue. I can mix it with my primaries. But honestly, at that point, I'm tired and I just want to do something else. So that's why I keep brown on. It's easier to use that way. Because what if I had to go from this to another color? I wanted to go from the brown. I have to mix up a bunch of brown to then have on the side to do those other micro mixes. Phthalo green, I love it. It makes a crazy mint. And that Dox purple and phthalo green make blue. Quinacridone magenta and phthalo green make purple. Blue. This makes purple. And I oftentimes have yellow ochre because it does a lot of nice skin tones in Caucasian and deep brown ranges. It works really well in any kind of skin mixing stuff and sand and other things. But I'm not doing that one on Acrylic April. And then we went over here and we talked about tints and tones and shades. That's where we were. And you saw how we were able to tint with white but also tint with yellow. And then we shaded with blue and we shaded with black, and we saw how they were essentially the same. And I showed you two brands of magenta that were slightly different yet very similar and can change things a little bit. And we talked about that magenta, if you can't find Quin Magenta, is perfectly fine. Okay, as a good recap, I'm going to see you at the next color mixing video. We are coming up on Acrylic April. Painting every day from April 1st to April 30th, a daily painting. It is going to be something different than I've done before. I know some of you guys are going to be like, we're going to be making the announcement real soon. I'm actually going to reveal the paintings and the theme. But here's the thing. Even if you're like, oh, that's not really my jam. The patrons, I've been testing it on them. And even the ones who are like, I don't want to do it. I don't like that kind. I've been like, oh my gosh, this is actually fun, because it is actually fun. And the reason we're doing the color mixing is it's going to make April a little bit easier. Okay. And I have been working real hard on April. I think you guys are going to love it. And there's huge news with books, and there's huge news. There's news articles coming out. I got in the Associated Press. There's stuff happening.
Patrons need to keep an eye on your newsletter. We're going to be announcing store migration opening for accounts soon.
Yes.
Like we're hoping this week. So keep an eye on your newsletters. There's stuff going to happen. We need you guys to be aware first, because we want to make sure you guys get your account set up first.
Yeah. Yeah, because I think we have a discount thing for some of the patrons.
Yeah, there's some stuff there, so you need to be paying attention to your newsletter.
Pay attention to your newsletter. Guys, I really appreciate you. Please keep coming and mixing color with me. If we get this color thing down, the rest of the painting gets easy. I hope this helped you. I can't wait to see your practice charts. Be good to yourselves. Be good to each other. And I want to see you at an easel really soon. Bye-bye.